Good evening. My name is Marlis, and welcome to the Anxiety and Depression Workshop. As you might know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So the social ministry team of this church decided this workshop would be a great way to educate the community and honor our friend Pat Danino, a longtime member of this church. A few of Pat's passions were her community, social justice, and mental health. Her legacy lives on through a fund in her name that was set up by Pat and her husband Bob. This workshop also holds a special place in my heart. My son Ian died by suicide last September. His passing opened my eyes to the silent battle so many face, and the urgent need for open conversation and accessible support to enable those in need to seek help to prevent others from experiencing such a loss. This evening, it's a pleasure to welcome two professionals from St. Luke's Penn Foundation, Ryan Schweiger and Kim Stone, here to lead us in the workshop. First, we'll hear from Ryan.
All right. Do I take that? No, I'm
No,
good.
you got
All
it.
right. All right. Well, hey, everyone. My name is Ryan Schweiger, and like my introduction, I work for St. Luke's Penn Foundation. If you're not familiar with Penn Foundation, we are a mental health provider, primarily located in Sellersville. That's where our main campus is. But St. Luke's University Health Network acquired Penn Foundation coming up on 4 years ago. And now St. Luke's Penn Foundation is an actual service line for St. Luke's University Health Network for mental health care, including drug and alcohol. So you'll see if you are in like the Lehigh County area, Northampton County, Easton area, you'll see Carbon, Monroe counties, you'll see the St. Luke's Penn Foundation name. But if you're from this community and you're familiar with Penn Foundation, that you know Penn Foundation is a destination. You know, it is an actual place. So we're still there. You know, I'm grateful to be here, to be able to present and to talk about mental health. Again, like May is Mental Health Awareness Month. It's really important that people come together to celebrate mental health. We all have brains. If you have a brain, raise your hand. Then you have mental health, right? Like we all need to take care of our mental health and our well-being, and we all need to take care of each other too. That's really important, right? And be mindful of what each other are going through, and be intentful about that and intentional. So, you know, I love this statement up here that says there is no health without mental health. No health without mental health. You know, we need to take care of ourselves, and it should be integrated. Same with physical health. Same thing if you hurt your knee, you know, you go to the doctor. Same thing with your mind, right? You go to a doctor, you go get care, you get treated and get connected. So another really important thing to me, to make you all aware of, because I'm not doing storytelling really tonight, but is that I am a person who is in mental health recovery myself. I am a certified peer specialist, so I use my lived experience to support other people along their journey of recovery. And I am also, so I've struggled with my mental health. I remember being a young person and being taken to see a psychiatrist and a therapist by my parents, and being prescribed medicine that sometimes would work and sometimes it wouldn't, and talking to adults about my family and how I felt and how I was thinking. And, you know, I didn't really like it too much, especially as a young person, right? And that led me into experimenting with illicit drugs, and I struggled, guys, with drug use, addiction, a substance use disorder then for 12 years of my life, and I've been in recovery now from addiction or substance use for over 16 years. So I'm a person who's also in long-term recovery from a substance use disorder that I truly believe stemmed from, my mental health or my lack of mental health, and using substances as a crutch or a coping mechanism for my own. I thought it was helping me, right? But in the end, there's a lot of things that come when you can become dependent, physically dependent to substances, and it's not just mental anymore. So anyway, I just wanted to give you guys that disclaimer. You're talking to a person with lived experience tonight too, and I share that proudly and openly, and I think that's really important. So, okay, let's hit the next slide. We're going to watch this quick video, and then I'll engage a little bit. So just pay attention to what's going on here.
We face a stigma that can be as painful as the disease itself. Change a mind about mental illness, and you can change a life.
All right, so entertain me here. What did you see? What did you pick up on in that video?
Is that going close?
Yes. Yeah. What else did you pick up on in that video? Come on. Yep. Everyday people, right? So individuals living with mental health challenges are everyday people, right? We don't know necessarily who has a mental illness, right? We don't wear labels that say things like the shirts were saying, right? I told you guys a little bit about myself. I didn't, you looking at me up here, you didn't know, well, hey, Ryan has to struggle with some type of mental illness, and Ryan is in recovery from addiction for 16 years, right? But so we can't expect that people that we're seeing in every day aren't dealing or struggling with something. And not just the individual. How about that, right? Because how about the other T-shirts on the flip side? Mother, support, sister, what did the one say? Battle buddy, post-traumatic stress disorder, right? So it's not just even about the individual all the time. It's about their friends. It's about their family. Mental illness can have a ripple effect, right, on not just the person, but their family, their friends, the community, right? And so can mental health recovery too, right? It can have a positive ripple effect on the person, the family, and the community. So, there's this saying, right, that's like labels aren't for people, they're for jars, right? And so, I think that's really important too, that we stop labeling people and we just start looking at people as people, and we all might be going through something at some time, and just knowing that. It said 1 in 5, right? Let's do the math. I mean, I already shared my experience with you guys, so I'm one of those 5. But I think there's probably close to 30 some people in here, right? So that means at least 6 of us, 7 of us might be living with mental health challenges ourselves, right? That's the data, right? So we need to keep normalizing this so that people feel more confident with talking about it. Can we go to the next slide? All right, there we go. The video again. We don't want the video again. I had to. All right, so what does mental health mean to you? Let's go. This is your turn. Matt, go ahead. You don't have to look up there. What? Self-care. So mental health means self-care. Was it Lisa? Wait, no. What was your name? Jen. I'm so sorry. I'm horrible with names. What's mental health mean to you? Mental health. Your mood. All right. What else? Give me some more. Go ahead. Peace. Peace. So inner peace, calmness. What else? Emotions.
An ability to handle things that come to you without breaking down.
An ability to handle things that come to you without breaking down.
Like coping. Coping. Thank you.
Coping. Go ahead. Wait, hold on. I heard a really great word. Really great word. Go ahead. Say it nice and. Huh? Resilience. Resiliency. I love that word. That's a great word. Yeah, so mental health can mean many things, and mental health is super important, right? It's something everyone has. We talked about that in the beginning. All of you raised your hand and said you had a brain, right? So it's something that everyone has. It's on a continuum, right? It's not just start and stop, right? It's on a continuum. It's worth making time for and taking care of. It's part of being human. It's something we need to look after. It can be positive or negative, changeable, complex, and it's real. What mental health is, and it's not a sign of weakness. Mental health is not a sign of weakness, taking care of your mental health. It shouldn't be shameful. It's not all in your mind. It's not always something negative either. I was talking about that with somebody last night, actually. I went back to Penn Foundation. We had some presentations in the community that Jen was at. And not Lisa, Jen. We did this ribbon for Mental Health Awareness Month. Green is the color, by the way, for mental health awareness. For those of you who don't know, green is the color that represents mental health awareness. And so at Penn Foundation, we had an employee event was it this week? No, it was last week. And we had an employee event, and with some of the clients in our programs, we made this huge ribbon out of pinwheels, green pinwheels. It's really cool. If anyone wants to see the pictures, connect with me afterwards. It's really neat. And so there's all these pinwheels, hundreds of pinwheels, this huge green ribbon in the middle of the front of the building. And me and my colleagues then, we strung it up with LED solar lights that are green. So at night, it glows, it illuminates green. It's really something to see, seriously. So I went back last night. I do some drone photography and videography. That's part of my wellness. I get kicks out of that, right? And it makes me feel good. And I gift that stuff to people when I take footage. And we get there, and I turn the lights on, and there's blotches of it that are blank. There's no lights. And what I didn't realize is that every one that you plug in, there's the first 3 feet, there's no lights on, right? And I'm like, no, oh my gosh. And the clients that I was with that were out there with me are like, it's all right, no one's gonna notice. I'm like, well, I notice. My obsessive compulsiveness of my brain noticed this. This has to be changed, right? And then we started talking about that, right? How we had this conversation in the middle of this, right? Where sometimes it can be strengths, you know what I mean? That our mental health, even a mental illness and being in recovery from that kind of stuff can actually be an asset. It's not all negative, to have mental health challenges. Anyway, sorry for that long story, just to say that. It's not always feeling good all the time either. It's not something that you can just snap out of either, right? So it's not just saying, hey, stop that, stop it, stop, stop being depressed, stop having anxiety, That's not what mental health is, right? Telling someone to stop it or stop doing something. So anybody else want to share what mental health means to them at this point in time? Huh? Clarity. Who said that?
I don't remember what he said. I don't know if that was.
Self-care. Yeah, but clarity can be too. Being aware, self-care, clarity. All right, next slide, please. All right, mental illness, on the other hand, mental illness is a condition, and it affects a person's thinking, their feeling, their behavior, or their mood. These conditions can deeply impact the individual's day-to-day living. And also can affect their ability to relate to other people. Mental health conditions are far more common. We talked about that. What is it? 1 out of how many? 5. 1 out of 5. So it's more common than people think, mainly because people could be scared to talk about it, right? They don't want to talk about it. You know, we don't, you know, I think about that. I've become very comfortable with talking about my mental health, like seriously, right? Like you might not even want to talk to me about it because I just won't stop talking about it, right? But like my physical health, on the other hand, I can get kind of like, I don't want to talk about that. Let's ignore that, you know what I mean, right? So different strokes for different folks, but some, you know, people don't like to talk about it, right? So next slide, please. And how common is mental illness? So we talked about that again. 1 in 5 adults will experience mental illness each year. 1 in 25 U.S. adults experience severe mental illness. So when we're talking severe mental illness or an SMI, we're talking about some of those labels that were up there. We were talking about things like schizophrenia, schizoaffective, bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, major anxiety disorders, these severe mental illnesses, borderline personality disorder. 1 in 6 U.S. youth age 6 to 17 will experience a mental health disorder each year. And that's a lot of people. That's a lot of young people that'll experience a mental health disorder each year. 50% of all lifetime mental illness begins by age 14, and 75% of lifetime mental illness begins at age 24. And suicide is the second leading cause of death amongst people aged 10 to 34. Does anyone know what the first cause of death is between that age group? Take a stab at it. Huh? Car accidents. It's just accidents in general. It could be anything. You know, you're walking down the road, you trip over a curb, you hit your head, you know, or it could be anything. A car accident, whatever, any type of accident is the leading cause. But suicide is the second, you know. And, you know, somebody shared their lived experience already tonight. You know, we all know someone, you know. So, yeah, we need to change that. And I think these are those opportunities that are going to continue to shift that, right, is by talking about stuff openly. Next slide, please. All right, so mental illness, a mental health condition isn't the result of just one event. Genetics can play a part of it. Again, there's evidence there. There's data, there's evidence, there's research. Genetics, environment, the environment, trauma could be a part of that environment. Lifestyle can influence whether somebody develops a mental illness or not. A stressful job or a home life can make some people more conditioned to a mental health challenge. Traumatic life events, like I said, trauma, biochemical processes and circuits, and brain structure can play a role too. So you can see it's pretty complex, right, and deep. It's not just cookie cutter, like, hey, this is why you have a mental illness. This isn't why. It's not cookie cutter. Different people look different, just like physical health challenges, right? I might not develop a physical health challenge that you'll develop, or even people in my family, right? But it is something that you want to look out for. But none of this means that the person is broken or that anyone's doing anything wrong. Mental illness is no one's fault. For many people, recovery, including meaningful roles in social life, school, and work, it's possible. Recovery is possible, especially when the person starts treatment early. So it's really important, you know, if someone in your life or yourself is struggling to start treatment, don't delay, you know, get help, get connected in one way, shape, or form. And I think it's really important, and we're going to talk more about that too, but a lot of times people think traditionally, right? Like, oh, I need, and not to minimize this, right? But I need therapy, I need psychotherapy, I need a psychiatrist, right? And again, not to minimize or say that somebody doesn't need that, but they don't know that there's all this other stuff out there that they can be working on, and maybe those things like psychotherapy or psychiatry just aren't available right then and there when they feel the need for it. But there's other things, and we're going to talk about that people can get connected to for their mental health. Next slide. Here's an impact on social media and teen mental health. To be honest, I don't even know how to really read this chart too much, but 81% of teens use social media. As of 2021, 8th and 10th graders spend an average of 3.5. I think that's gone up, but this is just the data that we have, 3.5 hours per day. A study of adolescents aged 12 to 15 found that those who spend 3 hours a day on social media face double risks of experiencing mental health conditions, right? So this of anxiety and depression, what Kim's going to talk about, anxiety and depression. These things are fueling a mental health crisis, right, in young people, even for adults. I mean, honestly, let's get honest, right? Who here feels like they may be a little addicted to their phone? I mean, I know I am, I get sick of it, and I try to put it down, and I go, all right, I'm done. I'll delete the apps, everything, and then 3 days later, well, let me just check on this or that. Next thing you know, I'm back at it, I'm on the screen, on the phone, and I get that reminder on Sundays through Apple that tells me how much screen time I'm spending, and I'm like, oh my God, it's higher than that number of the teens that said in 2021, right? But you can see here it's showing just some of these social media platforms and the harm that they have, right? So it's saying that YouTube is more positive or isn't as harmful as something like Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, because YouTube has more educational video, longer video type content, where the Instagrams and the Snapchat and the Facebooks are having this more instant gratification, one thing after another, and our brains aren't wired for that. They're just not, they're not wired to be receiving that type of information. It's causing harm. That's what we're seeing. Next slide. Impact of social media on teen mental health. There are positive. We always have to remember that. There are positive aspects to social media. There are, right? So communicating, staying up to date with family, friends around the world, finding new friends or communities. There's even things for your mental health on social media. There's outlets specifically for mental health that people get a lot out of. Joining or promoting a worthwhile cause. I'm going to encourage you all to, when you leave this door, to take a picture out by the step repeat banner that says Mental Health Matters and hold up one of these signs, that I hope that you do, and use your social media platform, if you have one, for a positive manner, to spread mental health awareness, right? That, again, it can be used for these positive things too, like an awareness or an important issue, because it does spread, right? It spreads awareness. Finding an outlet for creativity or self-expression, discovering sources of valuable information and learning, but it has a lot of negatives. So inadequacy about your life or appearance, comparing yourself to other people, a lot of that stuff on there, right? It's just not real, it's people creating this story that they want to convey that isn't necessarily true or real. And we, as human beings, we try to measure ourselves up to that unrealistic life. Fear of missing out or FOMO, I got to be there, I got to do this, they're doing that, I got to be there. And that kind of starts to drive, your decision making and your behaviors. It also can create isolation, right? Because you're not having that physical connection to people anymore. The good old-fashioned handshake and, that a boy, and, you get what I mean. It can cause more depression and anxiety, cyberbullying, which is, you can be anyone behind a computer screen or a phone, right? So it creates more opportunity for people to bully and feel like they can hide behind a screen and say things to certain people that they wouldn't say, maybe even if they were face-to-face. It hinders brain development. We know that the prefrontal cortex, especially for young people, that's one of the last parts of the brain to fully develop. And that is the part of the brain that functions to help with decision making and risk taking. So it's really, again, we know that drugs do that too. Addiction does that, the hijacker in the brain, and it prevents that prefrontal cortex from fully developing in the young person's brain. Addiction. So anyway, next slide. Here's just a snapshot. It's kind of fuzzy, but that is Commissioner Bob Harvey. He is the chair of commissioners for Bucks County. Bucks County, they took a stand a few years ago, and they actually put out a lawsuit against the social media tech giants, saying that social media, these social media platforms are negatively impacting Bucks County youth, mental health, right? So this is just to kind of show you how serious it is, right? Like where the county right here, Bucks County, next to Montgomery, there's a lawsuit, against these social media giants. Just like if you think about, I'm sure you're all aware of the opioid lawsuits, right? And the opioid settlement dollars in PA, billions of dollars, right? Like this is the same kind of stuff that's happening with tech, right? Because we know that it's harmful, that it's not doing good. It's fueling negative mental health and addiction in our not only for us. I saw a lot of the adults raise their hand, including myself. No shame, I'm just saying. But in our young people, in our youth. Next slide. So what hurts? Minimizing the individual's experience that the person or the family is having. It's all right. Everything's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. It's minimizing. It's minimizing your experience, right? Fixing the problem. Does anybody here a fixer? Yeah? All right. Anybody here have a fixer in their life that they're like, stop trying to fix me? I don't need you to fix me. I just want to talk. That's it. Just hear me out. I don't need the solution, right? Like I just want to tell you how I'm feeling. So we don't want to be a fixer. That's actually harmful, minimizing the experience. Labeling. We talked about that, right? So labels are meant for what? Jars, right? They are not meant for people. So labeling. So an example is she's bipolar. He's schizophrenic. We wouldn't say that if somebody had, cancer, right? I wouldn't say she's cancer, right? We would say she's living with cancer, or she's in remission from cancer. So the same way, we would say she's somebody who's living with bipolar disorder. She's somebody who's struggling with schizophrenia. He's somebody who is in recovery from a substance use disorder, or in recovery from depression, right? The person first, right? Blaming, we don't want to blame people. Why can't you just do this? Why can't you just do that? Why can't you just get out of bed today? These things, they're hurtful. They don't have positive effects on individuals. And just remembering that language matters, right? So when we're talking about stuff, we don't want to say, I'm going to say some words here that aren't great, right? Like, and whatever. Like, he's crazy. That word is not good. We don't want to say that kind of stuff. And I think we've come a long way. Sometimes when I talk to young people and I talk I bring up these examples, they kind of look at me like I have 5 heads, and they're like, why would we say that? And I'm like, well, there's still this fog in the sky of this language, right? That I know, the language. Even with somebody who's struggling with addiction, calling them an addict, a drug addict, a junkie, like these types of this language. We don't want to use that type of language, because again, that creates more of somebody not wanting to be, they don't want to be that label, right? So it might cause people to not talk about this kind of stuff. Next slide. All right, so that brings me to stigma. And so stigma, and I know Kim's going to talk about this too, but stigma is a negative bias about a person or a group of people. And it's unfair. It's an unfair bias. People who are struggling with mental illness, or people who are living in mental health recovery, they do face a lot of stigma and unfair judgment. And the thing about stigma is, it might not even just be external. The person themselves may be stigmatizing their own selves, right? Because of what they have learned or generationally has been passed down to them about what it is to have mental illness or struggle with mental health, that they may be going through this cycle internally themselves, where they're stigmatizing themselves, right? And then it creates this division of like us versus them, and stigma is nothing good. So we say stigma, no shame. We want to promote no stigma. So this is just a little video about stigma. Go ahead.
You know that feeling where your thoughts scare you or make life tough. Sometimes it feels like no one else in the world has those thoughts or feelings. No one seems to know how difficult it is to deal with your feelings. And it's not easy to share your deepest secrets. You might think something is wrong with you. Or you might worry what other people think. And all of that makes your thoughts and feelings worse. Our culture has created this environment of shame. Until the 1960s, society sent people away if they had challenges managing their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Over time, we learned that we didn't have to be afraid. We learned how to help people get better. We became hopeful. But there are remnants of those images in our culture today, which is why some people still feel uncomfortable talking about it. The stigma has taken new forms too. With more access to more people all the time, it can seem like the world is telling us it's not okay to be anything but perfect. The truth is, everyone has thoughts or feelings that can be hard to deal with. So why do we make it so difficult on ourselves by judging others who could be going through the same challenges we are? What if, instead of seeing labels, we saw people who are struggling and could be there for them so they didn't feel so alone? What if we looked past our fear of mental health and started to talk about it in a constructive way? What if, as a society, we used empowering words and healthy images to help people feel supported? Maybe then, more of us could feel comfortable telling others when we're having a hard time. Maybe more people would get the help they need. And maybe one day we won't have to talk separately about mental health and physical health, but just health. The truth is, each of us has the power to change our culture. Will you join us? Share this video with a kid, your neighbor, a friend, and help us break the stigma of mental health.
All right, so break the stigma, right? That's the main thing here. No stigma, no shame. Let's
You know
talk
that
about
feeling?
it. And I love, go back to that. I love, not the video, but just the slide. So, in the corner there where it says mental illness and crossing out illness and it says wellness, right? There's this saying too, and it's kind of like cheesy, I don't know, whatever. But it's like, hey, when we replace I with we, illness becomes wellness. Anyone ever hear that? It's kind of cool. I've just heard it so many times. It's kind of whatever. I said it. You caught me saying it. So, but when you replace I with we, then even illness becomes wellness, right? So it is about community. It's about connection. It's about understanding. It's about talking about this and developing relationships around mental health. Go ahead, next slide. Just want to quick highlight this. So SAMHSA stands for the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration. They are the federal entity that oversees substance abuse and mental health services for the country, right? And so they have created these dimensions of wellness that they identify as this is a person as a whole, right? And this is the lens that SAMHSA directs us to look at a person through, right? That you're not just one thing. I'm not just Ryan, who's in recovery for my mental health and for my substance use disorder, right? But I'm Ryan, who also works, has a job and fuel and has a financial part to my life, and has a social aspect to my life and has friends and relationships. And I'm Ryan, who also practices spirituality. And I'm also Ryan, who works on my physical health. And Ryan, who has gone to school and taken trainings and worked on my intellect. And maintains a healthy living environment. And so I'm made up of all these things, right? And we have to remember that about all of us and all people, right? That like not just looking at one aspect of somebody's life, but looking at these other aspects of their life. And maybe if they're struggling in one of these areas of their life, it could be their mental health, it could be the emotional part of their life. Well, maybe they're not ready in that area of their life to change quite yet, their mental health. But maybe I can meet them in another area, right, of these dimensions and work on that with them. And as I work on that with them, and if I'm their supporter or I'm their friend or a family member, then maybe some of the other stuff will start to change and get better too, right? Maybe if I meet them where they're at with their physical health, maybe their social health will start to change, because maybe their physical health was preventing them from going out and being social. And then as the social part of their life changes, maybe then they get their occupational part of their life changes and they get a job. And then because of that job, their financial part of their life starts to change, right? Because they're making money. And then maybe their environment changes because they can get an apartment or a house, right? You guys see where I'm going with this, right? So it's about looking at a person through that lens of all these dimensions of their life, and knowing that just because one part or two parts or three parts they might be struggling in, or they're not ready to work on, that there's other areas of their life that we can try to focus on. And the hope would be that then there might be this ripple effect on those other areas of their life. Next slide. There's different tools for addressing mental health symptoms. There's all kinds of things that we can do. Peer support, case management, yoga, mindfulness, meditation, Tai Chi, exercising, support groups, community connections like activities, volunteering, work, school, faith communities, spirituality, church, all these different things. There's no wrong door. There is no wrong door to somebody getting better and finding what makes them feel better, right? Next slide. And just want to highlight too the National Suicide Crisis Lifeline, 988. So it used to be this really long 1-800 number, and there was this rapper Logic who made a song out of it, and it was kind of cool or whatever. But again, it's this long 1-800 number, and so now it's been shortened up to 988, just like 911 would be for an emergency, like a crises type emergency. 988 is the suicide lifeline. So you can call that 24/7. Text, you can text it, you can call it, whatever, right? And there are professionals, mostly volunteers, behind that line that will support you if there are thoughts of suicide, thoughts, feelings, fleeting thoughts, confusion, whatever, right? No judgment, no stigma. There's people there that'll help guide you. Actually, I had this one friend in my life who recently shared with me, and we don't even talk about the work that I do. I know her through a fellowship that I'm in, and she shared and said like, hey, I've been, not with me, she was sharing with the whole group, and she said, I started thinking about suicide, and I started thinking about it, and then I Googled it. I started Googling things about suicide, and the next thing I know, all these pop-ups started coming up on my phone, and they told me this 988 number, and the next thing you know, I'm on the phone with these people, and they're asking me if I'm alone, and they told me to go get my fiance, and I went and got him, and we ended up going to the ER, into the crisis and whatever. But I was like listening to her say this, and really I was kind of like on the inside, like happy. I'm like, wow. That's cool, that like, not that she was going through what she was going through, but the fact that she was even Googling like ways or means around suicide. And then the technology started like putting pop-ups, and then she actually followed the pop-ups and ended up on the phone with somebody that helped guide, like, you know what I mean? Said, go get your fiance now. He's in the house, go get him. Tell him what you're thinking, and they help guide. So 988, never forget it, that it's a really easy number to remember. Next slide. Just remember, recovery is possible. It's not just possible, but it's probable. It's going to happen for people. It happens for people. Recovery is not just possible, it's probable. No stigma, no shame, no wrong door, no wrong pathway. Get connected. Talk to someone, anybody that you feel comfortable with. Next slide. And just know that there's all these resources out there. Montgomery County has a great mobile crisis. We talked about 988. NAMI, Montgomery County, has a National Alliance on Mental Illness. That it's national. And so all the different counties have different chapters of NAMI. NOVA, the Network of Victim Assistance. Penn Foundation, of course. Bucks County and Montgomery County both have a suicide prevention task force. SAGA is the sexually and gender acceptance group, and they have different chapters even in these communities here that meet for people that identify and need that kind of support, because that is suicide prevention too, is, allowing people to be themselves and what they, identify themselves as. That's suicide prevention. So if you didn't know that, now you know. Anyway, next slide. And I am done. So I think I took more time than I was supposed to. I apologize. That was fun, though. I appreciate all of you. Again, please, let's keep celebrating Mental Health Awareness Month. When we do leave here, please take a picture, hold up a sign, take it on your own phone, have the church do it. Let's keep spreading awareness. Let's make a splash in the community. You're all here tonight. Just keep it going. That's the point. We need to keep it going. It's not just about tonight. It's about the rest of this month to celebrate mental health awareness. So without further ado, could we get a big, thunderous round of applause for Kim Stone? All right.
Thank you, Ryan. So, a little bit about me. I am an outpatient psychotherapist, so that means that I have an office and people come to me and sit in my office and we talk. Figure out how to help them with their depression, anxiety, all the things that they struggle with. So, I'm going to dive into a little bit more in depth into what depression and anxiety are, what signs you can look for, identifying it in the people that you love or in yourself, and what you can do to help. Okay? Next slide. So depression, let's start with depression. I'm going to get a little bit closer because I don't have my glasses on and I can't read. So depression, which often is called major depressive disorder, when it becomes severe enough that it meets the clinical definition of a major depressive disorder or a serious mental health condition. It's common and it's a serious mental health condition that affects how a person thinks, feels, and acts. So it's more than just feeling sad. It's not just, I had a fight with my spouse or I had a really bad day at work and I'm just really down about it. It's more than that. It's a deep down, empty feeling. It's persistent. It lasts longer than 2 weeks. So it's something persistent and it really affects how you think and feel. It can even affect your ability to get out of bed, okay? So it often requires treatment with medication or therapy or a combination of both. And usually the combination of medication and therapy together is the best form of treatment. It's the most successful. Okay. Symptoms include persistent sadness, fatigue, a loss of interest in things that you used to find fun or pleasurable, sleep disturbances, so you might want to sleep all the time. Or on the opposite side of things, you might not be able to sleep. You might not be able to fall asleep. It might take hours to fall asleep, or you might wake up a lot in the middle of the night and not be able to go back to sleep, okay? That leads into that fatigue part too, okay? Also feelings of hopelessness or helplessness, like you feel like things just aren't gonna get better. You feel like everything is so overwhelming that life is just hopeless, okay? And again, like Ryan talked about, thoughts of suicide. Like maybe you'd be better off if you weren't here. The people around you might be better off if you're not here. So it's pretty serious, okay? Next slide, please. So the causes of depression. Next slide. So depression, again, Ryan mentioned this earlier, but it can be genetic. It can be environmental. Usually with a genetic predisposition, there are environmental triggers that cause a depressive episode to happen. It could be something as stressful as a financial stressor or a death in the family. Or for some people, it's something as simple as if they had that fight with a significant other, and that's enough to start the ball rolling, okay? So risk factors include family history of mental health disorders. Like if you have another family member that has depression, or maybe they had premenstrual symptoms, like premenstrual dysphoric disorder, or postpartum depression, that sets you up for a higher risk of developing a depressive episode at some point in your life. Okay. Chronic stress, trauma or abuse, all of those things can contribute to a depressive episode. It also can affect how you perform at work or school. You might not be able to concentrate. It might make your work a lot more difficult to focus on. might make motivation to get those things done harder, like you just don't have the motivation to even start. So it can really interfere with a lot of different areas of your life. And usually when it starts to interfere with different areas of your life, like work, school, relationships, that's when it becomes a clinical disorder, where we would consider it like a major depressive disorder. Okay? Next slide, please. So before I go into the next slide, before I start to talk about anxiety, I want to see if anybody has any questions about depression. If you have anybody in your family, or you have friends or somebody that you know that might be exhibiting some of those signs that we talked about, the signs and symptoms. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. So anxiety. So one important thing to remember is that anxiety is natural. We are supposed to have anxiety. I always say to people, back in caveman days, we had to constantly be on alert for a saber-toothed tiger around the next corner. If we didn't have anxiety that kept us alert and ready to fight or flee, we wouldn't have existed for very long as a human species. So we are supposed to have some anxiety. It's what keeps you from walking out in front of a bus, right? It gets you to work on time. A little bit of anxiety is a good thing. And treatment in mental health is not meant to get rid of your anxiety. It's meant to make anxiety that you have easier to cope with and easier to handle day to day, okay? So when anxiety becomes excessive and persistent, like you just can't stop worrying about things, you can't get your stressors off your mind, it keeps you awake at night, that's when it starts to interfere with your day to day, and it can become difficult to just manage your entire life. So that's when it's important to get some kind of additional help. Okay. So some types of anxiety are generalized anxiety disorder. That's probably the most common one. And that is basically just anxiety that kind of entails everything in your life. You worry about your kids, you worry about your job, you worry about your finances. So it's excessive worry about a lot of different things. Okay. Panic disorder. So panic disorder is pretty much what it sounds like. You have panic attacks. So panic attacks are that feeling like the world is closing in. You can't breathe. You start sweating. Your stomach hurts. You feel like you're about to die because the anxiety is so overwhelming. That is a panic attack. When you have more than one panic attack in your lifetime, and you worry about the next time you're going to have a panic attack, that's when it becomes a disorder. Okay. Social anxiety disorder. This is also pretty common. Feeling afraid to go up to a stranger and say hi. Feeling afraid to speak out in a group like this. Fearing being judged by others. When that becomes so excessive to the point where you want to just stay home, you don't want to go to school, you don't want to go to work, you don't want to interact with people, you'd rather just isolate at home by yourself so you don't have to people, as I call it. That's when it becomes social anxiety disorder. Specific phobias. So the biggest one is, spiders, or the fear of heights, or, people can have phobias to just about anything. It's when those fears become so great that you do anything to avoid those triggers, whatever it is that you're afraid of. And OCD. OCD, I think Ryan mentioned it earlier. OCD is, it's not just my house has to be clean. It's not just things have to be lined up. Yes, those can be symptoms of it, but when those symptoms get to the point of, I have to spend 2 or 3 hours organizing my desk before I can do anything else. And those worries, those behaviors take up so much of your time that it interferes with you getting other things done. That's when it becomes that clinical disorder level. Okay. Also, that includes intrusive thoughts. It can be intrusive thoughts like somebody said to me the other day, if they didn't turn off their stove in a certain order or didn't turn off her bathroom faucet a certain way, she felt like something bad was going to happen to her mom. So she had to do things in a ritualistic way because she felt like if she didn't do that, something bad was going to happen to her mom. Okay, so that's kind of an example of an obsession with a compulsion, and that makes the obsessive compulsive disorder. All right. So symptoms of anxiety: feeling on edge, excessive worry, like I just talked about, like you just can't get that worry in your mind to stop. Difficulty relaxing, like, you might come home after a day at work and you want to just sit down and relax, but you can't. You feel like you are running on high energy, like a motor is driving you to do things. You can't sit still. You feel like you have to keep doing things. So trouble relaxing is a big one. You might notice increased heart rate, like when you're getting up in front of a crowd of people to speak. You might notice that your heart rate goes up. You might sweat. You might have stomach ache. You might even have chest pains. Chest pains don't necessarily mean you're having a heart attack. Sometimes when we're anxious, we don't breathe deeply enough into our chest. We kind of breathe just at the top of our lungs here. So that kind of constricts the amount of oxygen that our bodies are getting. So that is a big trigger for even more anxiety. Okay? So if you ever feel like you're anxious like that, and you feel like, you're short of breath, or you're getting lightheaded, or you have those chest pains, try to stop. Try to pay attention to how you're breathing. And make sure that you're taking a nice deep breath, as deep as you can, down into your belly, not just up here. I don't think we pay enough attention to how we breathe sometimes. So trying to take a deep breath in and then slowly breathe out again, that tells our body that it's okay to relax and calm down. We don't have to be in that fight or flight mode all the time. And that's pretty much, at the basis of anxiety is our fight or flight mechanism. Our nervous system becomes activated, and our bodies prepare to have to either fight or flee. So it's a normal response to have anxiety. It's normal to feel those things, but it's when it's persistent and it gets kind of out of control that it becomes a problem. Okay, next slide, please. And the next one, so risk factors and treatment we're going to talk about. So anxiety, again, can be caused by similar triggers as depression, like major life changes, genetic, environmental, biological things, all those things. Like, it could be just about anything. Any major life happening can trigger anxiety, especially if you have a genetic predisposition to it, like other family members have anxiety. Okay. It can affect your work or school performance, impact your relationships, and even your physical health. The more we have that chronic stress from either depression or anxiety, and anxiety probably is the one that you might see quicker physiological decline from or impacts. You might lose your appetite. If you lose your appetite, you might lose weight. You might lose some muscle mass. So, tune into those things. Tune into how well you're taking care of yourself, that all-important self-care. How are you eating? Pay attention to making sure that you are eating what you can, but make sure it's healthy. Try to get some exercise. You do all the things that you can to help nurture your body. Okay. So, anxiety also might lead to avoidance behaviors. Kind of like I was saying with the phobias before, you do anything to avoid that one particular thing, like spiders or snakes or heights. Anxiety can also, lead to you avoiding social situations. You might not want to go to that party that a neighbor is having. You might start calling out of work because you just don't want to have to deal with that project that's looming over you or the nasty boss. So we start to avoid things. Okay, those are red flags, things to look out for. So treatment for anxiety, and this is true for depression as well. Cognitive behavioral therapy, so working on how you perceive things, how you think about things, and trying to reframe that so you can tamp down those anxiety symptoms. Think a little bit differently about those things that are bothering you or worrying you. Just a quick mention of the thought, feeling, and behavior cycle. So cognitive behavioral therapy is based on the thought, feeling, behavior cycle. So what we think affects how we feel, and how we feel affects how we act. So if we can change the way we think about things, we can change the way we feel about it. And when we feel differently, we act differently. Okay, so cognitive behavioral therapy is the first approach. You can use medication in addition for both depression and anxiety. There are medication options, and a lot of different ones. So if one doesn't work for you the first time, don't give up, because another medication might work better for you. Some people get frustrated that the first one doesn't work, but persist and advocate for yourself. If a medication doesn't work or you have side effects, talk to your doctor and ask if there's something else that you can try. Medication and therapy often go well together, hand in hand. That has the fastest result to recovery. And then again, lifestyle changes. Try exercising. Try making sure that you are getting enough sleep at night, which could be challenging, but with some behavior changes, that can happen. Try to make sure that you are eating properly. Eating the best food that you can, the most nutritious food that you can go a long way. I don't think we give nutrition and even exercise enough credit for how we feel emotionally and physically. So try to fuel your body with healthy food. We can do things like mindfulness. Does anybody know what mindfulness is? Couple hands. Okay. So mindfulness is basically a technique to get you out of your head and be more present in the here and now. So just, sometimes we get distracted, we get caught up in the worries of life, we get caught up in our stressors, and we forget to pay attention to the right now. So mindfulness techniques do things like, have you use your senses. So a technique that I use a lot is called the 5-4-3-2-1. Stupid name for a really effective coping strategy. So start with 5. We have 5 senses. So sight is usually the easiest one. So start with your sight. Look around wherever you are. You can do this sitting here. You can do this at home. You can do it even when you're driving. Pay attention to the road, but you can do it while you're driving. So look around the room. Find 5 things around you that you maybe didn't pay attention to before. Like I didn't necessarily see that banner before. Maybe the drum set or the altar. Look around the room and really look at the detail of those things. Go through each of those 5 things that you see. Okay, then move on to 4, which could be 4 things that you can touch. So, maybe like the cool wood of the pew in front of you, or, like the softness of the clothes that you're wearing, or could be anything. So just reach out and touch things that are around you. 3 could be 3 things that you hear. This one is a little bit harder, I think, sometimes. But, maybe it's the sound of my voice. Maybe it's I hear some electrical sound. You might hear somebody cough in the room. So just pay attention to 3 things that you can hear. Then maybe 2 things you can smell. Sometimes that might be if you're wearing a perfume or cologne that day, maybe the scent of your cologne or perfume, maybe your laundry detergent on your clothes, or maybe your shampoo or conditioner, your hair products. Try those couple of things that you can smell. And then the last is taste, right? Taste might be a little bit hard. I often recommend that people carry around really minty gum or Altoids. Kids like Warheads, they're like real sour. They have a very strong taste. Pop something like that in your mouth and it'll make you pay attention real quick. Okay? So if you find yourself anxious, and you don't even have to be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, but if you find yourself anxious, try something like that. Okay? All right, next slide. So again, breaking the stigma. So depression and anxiety are among the most common mental health disorders, but people don't like to talk about it. I think it's easy enough for people to say, I'm worried about this, or I'm anxious about that. But it's difficult for people to say, I'm really struggling with this, and it's really impacting my life, right? the more that we can try to reach out and talk about it and make it more normalized in our culture, the easier it's going to be for other people to talk about it. Okay, so think about, trying to reach out to if you see somebody in your life struggling, reach out to them, ask them if they're okay, ask them if there's something that they need to talk about, ask them if they need help. Okay, just make it, make yourself or make a place where they feel like they're safe and they can talk about things. You might save a life. So, and again, the next section was just talking openly about mental health, talking about going to events like this, talking about resources that are out in the community, opening that up to people so that it's a topic that they get used to hearing about. So it becomes more normal, more day-to-day conversation instead of the secret that we keep inside. Okay. If you or somebody that you love is struggling with some of the symptoms that we talked about and you really feel like it's interfering with your life, reach out for therapy. Reach out to your doctor for maybe medication if you feel like that's needed. Reach out for help. There are community resources, and we have some information out on the table in the foyer to give you ideas of how to reach out. A great place to start is your primary care physician. Your primary care physician can either get you started on medication, refer you to therapy, or give you ideas of where to turn to get some help. Okay? St. Luke's Penn Foundation is available. I heard earlier that we have a pretty long wait list. So if you're patient, then eventually we'll get you in. You can also reach out to your insurance company. Sometimes your insurance company will have a list of local providers. Okay? So your insurance company is also a good resource. Okay? All right. Next slide. So talk to your doctor again about your symptoms. Even if you're not sure what it is that you're feeling, talk to your doctor. Your doctor has a good idea of kind of what some of these things are all about, and they can give you an idea of the next step. Okay? Contact your insurance company. And look for local support groups. Most communities have really great resources for support groups, whether it's for loss of a loved one, or anxiety, or depression, or bipolar disorder. There are all kinds of different resources out there. So contact, maybe your county seat, like Ryan talked about earlier, or your local government representatives. Sometimes they have good information about what's available in your community. Okay? Also, your local church, as you know, has some support groups. Your local hospitals often have support groups, okay? There are lots of resources out there, and if you don't want to do like the one-on-one talk therapy thing, that's okay, you don't have to. There are support groups where you can just go and sit and listen. You don't have to even talk in those groups, but sometimes just sitting and listening is enough to help you feel like you're not alone, okay? All right, what can you do on your own? So if you don't want to do any of those things, you don't want to reach out, or those resources aren't available to you, what can you do right now to help yourself? Deep breathing is one thing. Sometimes just sitting in quiet and breathing in and breathing out, and just paying attention to that feeling of the air going into your nose and the air coming back out again. Notice the temperature difference in your breath. Notice how it feels with your chest rising and falling. Just pay attention to your breath. Sometimes that can be very calming. Journaling is another thing that you can do. Sometimes you've got all this stuff in your head and it's hard to process it all because your thoughts go everywhere. Writing it down, even on a piece of scrap paper, sometimes can help you process things differently. Seeing it in black and white often can be very clarifying and help us deal with things a little bit better. Okay? Grounding exercises, like that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise I talked about. That is an example of a grounding exercise. Get you out of your head and grounded in the present. Okay? So that one is a good grounding exercise to put in your back pocket. Support groups, like we talked about, they're great things that you can do right now. Okay? Regular sleep. That might be hard, But if you do all the other things, you do your deep breathing, maybe meditate, maybe take a nice warm bath, get some exercise, eat healthy foods, limit caffeine and alcohol. Hopefully that will start to help you sleep a little bit better, especially if you can go to sleep at the same time every night and wake up about the same time every morning. Having a regular sleep schedule can help with insomnia or oversleeping. Okay? Proper nutrition and exercise we talked about. All right, next slide. That might be at the end. Yeah, that's the end. All right, so I'd like to open it up for questions. Does anybody have questions for me? Go ahead.
More towards depression than anxiety.
Yeah.
Medication. Is it masking or is it fixing it?
No, it really fixes it. So the way that antidepressants work is they help your brain absorb and use neurotransmitters in a better way, more like they're supposed to be used. So when we have depression and even anxiety, our brains don't use those neurotransmitters properly. It gets all out of whack. So antidepressants actually help your brain do that better. So it's not just masking, it actually does help. And sometimes, and I would say most times, you don't need to be on antidepressants forever. I think a lot of people resist medication because they're afraid that once they start it, they will have to take it for the rest of their lives. That's not always true. For some people, it is true. Like somebody with bipolar disorder or schizophrenia will probably be on medications their whole lives because their brain just is wired that way. Yeah.
Why is it so hard to get off antidepressants then?
I think because we get used to not only how we feel, but our brains sometimes don't work as well as somebody without depression. So the medication helps your brain work better in using those neurotransmitters. It doesn't fix the inherent problem. For some people, that, maybe like 6 months to a year of an antidepressant is enough to help them get back to the way their brain functioned before they had depression. For some people, it's just their biology. Okay? Does that make sense? Yeah. Not the answer you wanted to hear.
It's the opposite, really.
It is, yeah.
It's almost like you're addicted to it. Your body, your brain, you talked about fixing it, and I don't know.
Well, it's just like if you had diabetes. Ryan mentioned earlier, if you had diabetes, the medication, the insulin, doesn't fix the root problem. You need to be on that medication for the rest of your life to stay healthy. That's the same way with depression sometimes. And if that's what you need to stay healthy for the rest of your life, I think that's a small price to pay, as annoying as it is. Okay. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Explain intrusive thoughts. Is there, so you described it within the context of OCD?
Yeah. Yeah, you can have intrusive thoughts without necessarily having OCD. Intrusive thoughts are bothersome thoughts that keep entering your mind that you can't seem to stop or get rid of. That's all an intrusive thought is. When it becomes persistent to the point of, you really have to do some kind of behavior to help ease the anxiety that comes along with those intrusive thoughts. Or the intrusive thoughts happen all day long and you can't focus on anything else. That's when medication can be helpful and therapy can be helpful. Usually the combination of the two is the best. Other questions? I think I saw another hand somewhere.
It's more common than if you think you want to get off of an antidepressant, don't just stop.
Yes, that is a very good point. Don't go cold turkey off of an antidepressant. You really need to wean off with your doctor's guidance. You can have some pretty severe side effects. Not all of them are like that, but the most common ones, you really need to wean off those medications. Even if it's not working for you and you've been giving it the good college try for 4 to 6 weeks and it's just not working, don't just stop it. Taper off of it with your doctor's help and taper up on another one. Try another one. Go ahead.
Do you support the genetic testing to determine whether or not there are certain medications that will work better
Yeah, yeah. So one company is GeneSight. That is the one that St. Luke's Penn Foundation often uses. And I think it can be really helpful. It really just depends because insurance doesn't always cover it. I wish they would. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So it really just depends on your means and access to it. But I think it can be really helpful so that you don't have to try 6 different medications. If you find that there's a whole class that you just won't respond to, you don't have to go through all of that. So I think it can be very helpful.
What was the name of that company?
GeneSight. And it's S-I-G-H-T. Any other questions? Go ahead.
So what are some of the downsides of these medications? Because there's a lot of groups out there that say, don't take them, that they're not good for you, it's going to be more harmful than beneficial.
So I have a different opinion, and everybody is entitled to their own opinion. Everything has benefits and risks. There can be side effects. We don't always know, like some of the newer drugs, we don't know the long-term effects of taking it for years and years. A lot of them we do because they've been around for decades, so they've been studied for the long term. You have to weigh the pros and cons of how much is your mental health disorder affecting your everyday life, and is it worth risking possibly some nausea or some of the other common side effects that typically will dissipate, but only you can make that decision with your doctor. Informed decisions are the best for you. Did that answer your question?
I was just under impression there were more serious side effects than feeling nauseous, but I don't know.
Okay.
Being a zombie.
Yeah, some medications can do that. The more typical antidepressants don't necessarily have that side effect all the time. It really depends on your body chemistry too, which is why something like GeneSight can be helpful. Yeah, and again, you have to weigh the pros and cons. If you are considering suicide and killing yourself, then any side effect is going to be better than death. You really have to weigh what the benefits could be versus the risks. And one point with teenagers, sometimes a teenager put on an antidepressant can become suicidal on the medication. So that is something to look out for. If you have teens in your life that start a medication, keep a close eye on them because it's not common. I think in my 13 years, I've seen it twice, 2 kids. And I mostly work with adolescents and young adults, which is the population it's most common in. So it's rare, but it's a possibility. But again, you have to weigh the pros and cons, and it sometimes takes some experimenting with what's going to work for you with the least amount of side effects. Okay? Yeah.
I think too, and this is just through experience working with people with anxiety. And I'm going to connect the 2 worlds of like co-occurring. With a co-occurring disorder is when someone has both a mental health challenge and a substance use disorder, like myself, right? Like I've shared with you guys. And I think sometimes with anxiety, like some of the medications that like quote unquote like work, like when you need it, right? They're controlled substances.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
like a Xanax or Klonopin, those brand names
Yeah.
of medications, typically they're prescribed for anxiety, right? And the thing about those medications too, I think it's just really important for people to know, is that, and not that they can't be really helpful, they can.
Absolutely.
But sometimes people become, back to the medication, dependent on the medication, and they physically, those medications, that classification of benzodiazepine, they can become physically dependent to it, right? Where it's not just about, I need this because I have anxiety. It's your body needs it to function. And the problem is I've seen this with people where they're not aware of that, and they get it, and they get it prescribed, and doctors have been getting really good about not prescribing so much of that type of classification of medication for anxiety, but they still do, and I've seen people then like get cut off by their doctor, and they're like, oh crap.
Yeah.
I am physically going through withdrawal, right? Now they're talking about a physical dependency or addiction to the substance that was prescribed to them for legitimate feel like you're gonna die, right? But you can't die from a withdrawal from an opioid, right? But you can die from a benzo, withdrawal from seizures related to your body being physically dependent, right? And so it's just, I think when we talk about anxiety, that is a real thing. You know, some of these medications that are prescribed specifically for anxiety, they can be very addictive, and your body doesn't, you don't even realize it over time that your body is physically becoming dependent. So I don't know, I just wanted to highlight, not to say, again, I'm not anti-medication.
Yeah, they have their place, and that's not to say that everyone that takes those medications will become dependent. You know, for the person that takes it, you know, like a Xanax because they're anxious about a presentation or a meeting at work, you take that, you know, maybe once a week. Likelihood of you being dependent on it are small. But that's where being honest with your doctor is really important as well. And this is where I think stigma sometimes gets in the way. If you have any family history or personal history of any kind of substance use disorder, whether it's alcohol, nicotine, any kind of drugs, share that with your doctor. They can't help you with the best treatment for you unless they know all of that stuff. So it's so important to be honest with your doctor. Okay? A good doctor is not going to judge you. A good therapist is not going to judge you. So try to be as honest as possible. Okay? Go ahead.
Does Penn Foundation have support groups for the support system of the people with anxiety and depression?
I think in some locations we do. Up in our Bethlehem office, we do have one support group that helps caregivers or support people for people with serious mental health issues. What about Sellersville?
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
It's support groups for people that are the support system for the people with anxiety and depression.
Yeah, or friends.
I don't believe that we have that type of support group at Penn Foundation, of family support. But I would say what I would encourage anybody, you know, non-clinically, but look into your local NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. So again, depending on what county you live in, but the different counties have specific chapters, and typically there are support groups for those types of specific groups that you're talking about. I don't know if you ever looked into it, but I would encourage you to if you have support.
There's also another organization called the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance. So they will typically have community meetings every week. And in those meetings, they will break off into, like they'll have a general meeting and then they break off into people with depression, people with bipolar, and then the support people, the families, the friends. So the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance.
With a 12-step program, support group.
That's true, like an Al-Anon or Nar-Anon. Yeah, those are great too for getting support. No matter what, you know, even if it's for somebody that has severe depression or schizophrenia or something, you can get support at groups like that too.
And NAMI does have a specific group called Family to Family. So it is specifically for family members supporting other family members to connect and provide that peer support to other family members who may be struggling. Not specifically, I don't know, you know, where it's like anxiety, depression, but you know, it's called Family to Family, and it is for family members supporting other family members who are caregivers of, you know, individuals with mental illness, living with mental illness.
Check with your church too. Sometimes churches will have support groups like that. And even if your church doesn't have a support group, they might be able to call around to different churches and see if other churches have support groups like that too. Any more questions?
Everything's been related about treating the symptoms. Other than public awareness and stuff, what can be done to prevent? I'm into preventive maintenance, so I don't have to fix something. So
Okay.
what can be done? What can be done in the future other than public awareness as far as to try and increase the, whatever the disorder is that why one person can handle the stress and come out of it and not have an issue.
Right, right.
What can be done in the future other than public awareness that you could prevent more mental illness in the future? Is there anything?
So I think, and this is going to be a long, slow process, but I think the cultural awareness of the importance of good nutrition, of exercise, and taking time, balancing work and your personal life. And a lot of us in our country are workaholics. Most of our time during the week is spent at work. Making sure that outside of work, we are taking care of ourselves, spending time with family, doing things with friends, engaging in activities that you really enjoy. That's what you can do personally, but we can make that more, we can incorporate that more into our culture. I don't think we focus on our wellness enough in our society. Go ahead.
I was going to just say early intervention is, in my mind,
Yeah.
having wellness talks in elementary school.
Yes, yeah. I know in other countries, they focus on kids when they're really young on nutrition, exercise, getting outside, staying off of electronics, all of those things that seem like common sense, but we just don't do or don't pay attention to. So making it more of a cultural thing where everybody is, more along that mindset of we need to take care of ourselves starting when we're young throughout the lifespan. I think that would go a long way in helping a lot of people. Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen this, but it seems as though, like, the COVID epidemic was a little bit of a level the playing field a little bit. I think a lot of people came out of that with a lot of trauma. And
Yes,
mental health and
absolutely.
isolation. And then, I don't know if the numbers have gone up, or you've seen the numbers go up, or if it's just that people are seeking help more and recognizing and talking about it more. But it seems as though people are more freely speaking about it and admitting to having issues.
I don't have exact numbers, but I do believe, just from my own personal experience with my job, that, and I don't know if it's necessarily that there are more people that are predisposed to depression. I don't think so, but I think that collective trauma kind of spurred on some mental health crises. That was a very traumatizing time as a collective for around the globe. So I do think that more people are struggling with their mental health. But I also think, that because it was such a collective trauma and it was normalized that we were all going through it at the same time, it was easier for people to say, hey, that really impacted me. I'm not doing well, and are reaching out more. So, I think so. Yes, exactly. Exactly. We need more of that too, to give permission to people to talk about it.
I see a lot too, like I go into a lot of schools, like we're talking about prevention, and I see more and more in these school settings, middle schools, high schools, where students are taking the initiative to like develop mental health clubs themselves. And to your point, like, we wish there was just a cure, right, or whatever, that we could stop mental health challenges and addiction for that matter too, right, and suicide and all that stuff, right. We wish that there was like a cure. Challenges that these are the things that are happening mentally, right, but to see these young people taking the initiative to say, we want to prevent this, and we want to talk about this. I'm not that old, but when I was in high school, there wasn't a mental health club. I don't even in my generation remember mental health being talked about openly like that. And to see these young people doing that in their school systems, it's inspiring. Seriously, it is so inspiring to see that it is happening. That they are talking about it, that they are caring for one another and supporting, trying to support one another.
For as much of a bad rap as some of the younger generations get, they give me a lot of hope. The kids that I see are so passionate about their own mental wellness, but also of those around them. So I have hope for the future. I really do.
The statistics you showed for the 8 different age groups, statistically, how much has it increased? Like, there's so many environmental things that, with technology and Facebook and everything else. Back in the day, growing up, I'm 60, almost 70 years old. Life was simple, so you didn't have as many. My thing is from generation to generation, how much is the increase in mental illness going up? And is it because of social technology and everything that's going on? And life's just more, it's not as simple as it was back in the 70s.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think with social media, there is 24/7 access to people. You know, when we were kids in school, we went to school, we dealt with our bullies or whatever, went home and we could shut it all out because we wouldn't see them till the next day. Kids today are bullied 24/7. You know, they might get a little reprieve when they're sleeping, but they're on their phones, they're on their tablets, they're watching TV. You know, they're on all those social media apps, and they are bombarded day in and day out with a lot of negativity, whether it's bullying or not. There's a lot of negativity out there. And I don't know the numbers of how much it's increased, but it's increased significantly.
But you don't know, like, the data that you have is based on current.
2021, I think that study was from.
Back to tell how much the change of times has increased.
There probably is that data somewhere.
Google it.
Yeah. For real. Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. That would be, you know, maybe something good to include in future presentations, but yeah. Go ahead.
On the flip side of that,
Yeah.
I think social media can be used in a way that growing up in the 70s and going home, like you said, disconnected from school to an abusive home.
Very true.
By myself.
Yep.
So it's like the idea that now I know a child in that same situation can connect to friends.
Yeah.
Get help or whatever.
Even if it's not a, you know, traumatic or abusive home or anything like that, kids can be so isolated. You know, kids that are out in rural areas but go to school in maybe a more populated area, they don't have kids their age in their neighborhood necessarily that are easy to get to. They can stay in contact with the people that they know in school. So yeah, it can be a very positive thing. It's a balance. You know, we have to find that balance between, you know, how much time do we let them spend on their devices and social media? You know, as parents, I think it's responsible to monitor what they're doing on their phones or online and making sure that they're on appropriate websites and not being exposed to things they shouldn't be, or dealing with, you know, talking to friends that they know in real life, not some random stranger from Timbuktu. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, since it can be hard to get professional help, is there maybe like a self-help book that you'd recommend on how to deal with depression and anxiety?
If you go on Amazon and look for self-help books for anxiety or depression, you can find a lot of them. And I don't have one off the top of my head that's especially good, but there are some really good ones on Amazon, your local library, you know, depending on what you're willing to spend or not spend. You know, you can go to your local bookstore and pull one off the shelf and peruse it. Well, yes, that's true. That's true. There you go. There you go.
The books that helped me are on the back of this book.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. Next time I will remember to maybe have some suggestions for books that I can recommend. But you can find good ones in the library, in the bookstore, Amazon. Yeah, no, I've come across several good ones. I don't think you can go too wrong with the self-help books.
I would suggest the mindfulness apps too.
Absolutely, yes. Especially if you struggle with anxiety in your everyday life. I have several on my phone. One is, I've probably heard of Headspace. Headspace is a good app. Lots of free stuff on Headspace. Another one is called Calm. Yeah, that's a good one too. I'm trying to think if there's another one that I like too. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But Calm and Headspace are two really good ones that I recommend all the time. And you don't have to pay for a subscription on those. They have free content that you can pay for an upgraded subscription, but you don't have to. Go ahead.
And if you wanted something biblical, there's an app called Abide.
Oh, yes.
And that's
Yeah.
really
Yeah, that's a good one. Go ahead.
I just want to say to the gentleman too in the back, now that we're talking about books, sorry, we were jumping around, which is really great for
Yeah.
conversation. But there is a book, if you're interested in data too, it's something you're really interested in looking at. It's called The Anxious Generation. And it's a really thick book. But it's taking, like, you know, it's all in the headlines everywhere. All the different schools are reading it, and I've gotten through like a quarter of it. My wife's already done with it. She started reading it to me, but it has a lot of data because it's talking about that. It's talking about what you're talking about, how kids grew up without this and what the culture and what the dynamics when it comes to mental health look like, and now what it looks like, you know, and where it's going, projected, you know. So it's called The Anxious Generation. You can buy it, and you can rent it. We rented ours from the library, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, the only reason I said that was life was so simple.
Yeah.
It really was.
You probably enjoy reading this book, actually. You probably would enjoy reading the book, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming out.